I'm on a road trip in my converted campervan to photograph the southwest coastal path. With steep-sided coves, big waves and challenging weather forecast for Cornwall over the next 4 days. But first I have to get there, and that's proving a little tricky.
Well, I can't believe it. All I can see is the light changing and getting better and clouding in from the other direction. And I'm stuck. Stuck in the middle of a traffic jam on the A30 at no more than 10 miles an hour, watching the time slip away. Oh dear. Finally we're here, and the journey down hasn't been without its trials, shall we say. There's been high winds, heavy rain, more roadworks and hold-ups than I care to think about. What should have taken me 2 hours to get down here has taken me over 3 hours, and I left a little bit late to start with. Now that presents me with a bit of a challenge, and the challenge is time, because I had 2 separate videos planned for today, 2 photo shoots, one to the west, one to the east, to make the best of the weather. But the light at the moment is absolutely glorious. It's pouring in, the sun's relatively low because it's November, and there's a beautiful swell, and I can see breaking waves out in front of me looking at the front of the car. So I'm gonna go for it, challenge myself, put some speed on and try and get to those locations as quickly as I possibly can. So although the drive down turned out to be a bit of a challenge, and the weather conditions are certainly a bit of a challenge as well, I certainly did not expect what I've got behind me. It's very bright in the background at the moment, but I'm going to reveal to you the most fantastic spot that I've found on the coastal path already. And I've only been walking for about 5 or 10 minutes. Now, part of the reason which I came down, I thought, well, I'll put up with the threats of the weather and the rain, the high winds and the storms that are coming in, is because there are a few moments of opportunity, a few windows in that weather where I think we're going to have some really dynamic, changing conditions which are going to be absolutely fantastic for the locations that I've chosen. But they are indeed going to be very, very challenging, so it's going to be interesting to see how I manage to deal with those high contrast ranges. What I didn't expect was to find the location that I've got. It's a little bit difficult where I am because I'm kind of stood on the edge of a path, and it's quite narrow and it's quite boggy and muddy. But let's have a look at this. So as you may have seen, it's really been quite difficult to set up here and actually film it at the same time. But I'm going to explain to you exactly what it is I'm doing with the composition and what the issues are that I'm facing and how I've tackled those. And we'll do that by putting up a bit of viewfinder video. So I decided on a vertical format because I wanted the bottom of the frame and the foreground and everything to lead you out into the image and into that headland where we've got those rough seas rushing into this cove. There's some quite nice lighting down on the foreground as well, but of course it's very, very contrasty because we've got the bright white breaking waves coming in, and we've also got the very dark rock against the side of this headland. But I think I've managed to find a balance of the composition, and that's been really by tweaking things, moving the exposure a third of a stop at the time and bracketing. Worst case scenario, in post editing, I'm going to have to do an exposure blend, which is where I take one of those darker images of the sea with one of the lighter images of the rocks and combine those together, and hopefully that will give me the exposure that we need to make the final image. I've also put my polarizer filter on the camera. It's always a bit difficult to know under certain conditions whether the polarizer is going to work or not. But in this particular instance, I could see that actually it's working absolutely fine, and it was going to give me a nice deep blue sea and some nice strong colours, which I think is going to work well. I've also had to deal with the shutter speed and how I want that sea to be rendered, whether I want it smooth and creamy or whether I want some motion left in it. I do want some of that texture and motion left behind, so I'd use the 3-stop ND and a 6-stop ND as well. And that's just allowed me to experiment with the shutter speeds. And I'll put the final image up for you that I decide on, and with the full settings on it as well. So I've been walking along for quite a bit now since I took my last photograph, and there's been a number of different opportunities which have come up, but none of them have really been that great. None of them have really floated my boat and made me want to get out and take the images. And that's really been to do with the light direction and the way that the light's been interacting with the rock and the land, and the way it's been making the scene look a little bit flat, very hazy and quite boring. But I've come across something which I was hoping would deliver a very interesting subject, and it's not something that normally maybe I would think of taking, because I don't normally include architecture in my landscape photographs. But this particular piece, this lifeboat station, actually speaks to me. It's because of the shape of the roof. And something I look for in my images sometimes isn't only the contrast in the light, it's the contrast between different textures. But here we've got contrasting texture, and also we've got contrasting form and shape, and we've got the contrast between man in the landscape and the moving sea and the natural world itself. So I'm going to set my camera up and then I'll explain to you what this composition is all about. I had to work really hard to get the composition right for this photograph. And although it's going to be very, very simple with just this one curve of the roof, the straight line in the sea in the background, it does have to be perfect. There's lots of little brambles and branches in front of the camera which can intrude into the sides of the frame and distract the viewer from what you actually want to look at. So I need to make it 100% right. I think in final processing it's going to be a bit more of a letterbox image, so that there's an opportunity still to take a little bit of distraction out of the bottom, but I want it to be long and thin, and I want to amplify the shape of this curve as well. I'm going to put a polarizing filter on, although there is a nice sheen on the top of the roof, just to see if it actually helps with some of the definition of the lines on that roof or not. But I don't want to kill that sheen that we've got on there. And then I'm probably going to go for a 6-stop or a 3-stop ND just to smooth out that water in the background, so you get that nice smooth background and that movement in the sea against that really sharp angles of the roof. I'm going to set that up now and we'll have a look at how that works out.
Pre-visualization is an important part of photography. When I take a photograph, I try and see the finished photograph in my mind's eye. To steal and paraphrase from the great Ansel Adams, the digital file is the score and the edit the performance. Well, this is the image that I saw when I first made this photograph.
So I hope you enjoyed looking at these photographs. I really enjoyed taking them. One of the things though that I often think about, and I think I've read before in many different places, is that when you just photograph somebody else's creation, in this case it was the piece of architecture, you're really just copying somebody else's work. Well, you know, actually I don't subscribe to that line of thought, and the reason for it, for what it's worth, is really quite simple, and that is that quite often when you photograph something, you're creating something that's created anyway. Everything at some point was not in existence. So maybe that sounds like quite a get-out clause, but the world was created by something, regardless of what your religious beliefs are or what your views on science or anything else. Everything came into being from something. And the fact that somebody's built that structure and put it in that place, is it any more irrelevant as a photograph for me to take than the bridge at Ashness in the Lake District? Is it any more irrelevant for me to take that than it is for a beautiful mountain peak that was created by the erosion in soil and everything in the Ice Age? It doesn't really matter. It's come from somewhere. What I think is important is that you do justice to that subject. And in this case, I hope that I've done something that would please the architect who created that building, something that captures what they were trying to achieve maybe, or maybe I've put it in a way that they didn't quite originally intend for it to be seen and found a new dimension, although I suspect that's exactly how they wanted their building to be seen, against the ocean with that curve and the beautiful wave. Right, we got to crack on because we've got quite a long way to go, and I'm not entirely sure I'm going to have time to actually get to where I want to go and back again and get the second location in, and it is a place that I really want to get to and photograph, so it's time to crack on. So I've finally arrived down at Cadgwith Cove. It's a really wonderful place. I've never been here before. Old stone cottages, boats moored up on the slipways. But what's really captured my eye and what I want to look at is these wonderful waterfalls which are falling down from both the left and the right hand side of the of this little cove. But just how you capture that drama and how you capture the fact that it's not just a waterfall, but it's on a cove at a beach and you've got the coast in the background is going to be a bit of a challenge. So I've just been using my iPhone down on the rocks just to sort of look through the viewfinder and just try and work out what a composition might look like before I set the camera up. And I think I've come up with something that's going to work really, really well just behind me. So I'm going to set that up. And if it works and it comes out well, then I'm going to get you down there with me and I'll explain to you all about that composition. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get a photograph of the waterfall on the other side, although it is really quite beautiful to look at. We'll just have to see how things work out. So I've set up a composition that I like. I wasn't quite sure whether the polarizer was going to work or not, so what I actually did was took the opportunity to try the polarizer before I put it on the camera. I've been doing that for quite a while. It's something that not everybody realizes, but you can just hold the filter up in front of your eye, rotate it, and then you can get a really good idea of whether or not the polarizer is going to have the desired effect. It's easier to do it that way, certainly with a lot of compositions or different situations that you get yourself in as a landscape photographer. The more information that you actually have before you put the camera on the tripod and sort things out, the better it is for you, because there's less to do when you're setting up. And sometimes if it's bad weather, it's raining, you don't want to expose your camera to that bad weather for any longer than it's necessary. But anyway, we've set the composition up. I'm going to talk you through that now. So let me put this up on the screen. So if you look at the viewfinder, you'll see that in the bottom sort of left hand corner we've got the rocks and the dark rocks of the beach and some pools heading out towards the coast. So I think I've managed to capture what I wanted to do with trying to get the fact that we're at the coast and the seas here into the frame as well. But I really love this waterfall, and I've worked it into the composition in really quite a strong way. It now takes your eyes down from the top right hand side down into those pools and the rocks and around and out to the distance. The difference in exposure between the sea in the background and the sky, which I may crop out completely, and these dark areas and the shadow areas around the waterfall is massive. So I've taken a number of images and bracketed my exposures, and what I'm hoping is that by doing that bracketed exposure effect, I can have enough information there to merge those together as an exposure blend inside of Photoshop or Lightroom and create the image that I've got in my mind. It's important when you set up your photography and set up your cameras that you've got that finished image fairly locked in so that you don't end up in a situation where you get home and you haven't got the information that you need. Okay, I'm hoping that there's one more picture that I can take here. It may not be possible. I'm going to have a go at it. I'm not going to vlog it, but I will show you this image and the next one if it comes out. Right, have a look at this and see what you think, and I'm going to have a go at my next composition.
I couldn't find a good composition for my second photograph. The advancing time and the desire to reach my second destination for the day clouded my creativity. The sun's position cut an annoying division along the cliff face. Whatever the reason, I just didn't feel it. And I walked away, a decision that I would regret and also correct in a few days' time.
But if you want to see the next video, the next location that I really want to photograph, it's a bit special, then please, I'm down here for a few days, so subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon when you do that, give the video a like because it really helps, and I'll see you in the next video coming really, really soon.